Welcome back. It is 10 minutes past 8 a.m. Central African time. You're tuned into News and Views on Salam Media. Joining me now is Ilham Rawoot, an activist and writer. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining us.
Walaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
So, you have written an opinion piece for the New Arab, uh, an analysis piece rather, detailing the relationship that South Africa has had with the Zionist State of Israel over the years. And of course, this has varied from time to time. Under the apartheid regime, it was quite friendly with the Zionist regime in Tel Aviv. And more recently, now, on face value at least, it would appear that South Africa uh, is with the Palestinian cause. Talk to us about this analysis piece, the inspiration behind it, and your overview of what you've written.
So it's really interesting because South Africa is like quite an anomaly on the world stage in that you see Cyril Ramaphosa at the beginning of the war standing with the kafia holding the Palestinian flag and his entourage behind him. And they have called, what's happening now in Gaza, they called it a genocide, they've called it even a Holocaust. The language that they've been using is unprecedented, in terms of the way that other countries have been, the Western countries have been referring to Israel. So in one way you look at them and you say, this is amazing. Our parliament even voted overwhelmingly to expel the ambassador. But when it comes down to it, it's almost schizophrenic, the way that they speak and the way that they act. The president actually didn't expel the ambassador. The ambassador was recalled the day before the vote. And they're one of our biggest, we're one of their biggest trade partners. In Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, we do a third of the trade with them, which is really good, and by far after, and the second country after Nigeria. So these are big, without cutting economic ties, without cutting diplomatic ties. Is there a point in wearing a kafia, on TV? Is there a point in flying a Palestine flag? It's important for national morale, but when
Ilham,
it actually comes down to it.
Ilham, my apologies to interrupt, but if you could just move around a bit, hoping that we could get a better connection with you.
Oh, you can hear me well?
Okay, it's better now. You can
What about
continue.
now? Is that
Yeah,
better?
sure.
Sorry, I'm actually, I'm out of the country and I'm in a bit of a rural area, which is probably why.
Okay, it's better now. I think you may continue.
Okay. So as I was saying, if we don't cut economic ties, we don't cut diplomatic ties, we're still one of their biggest trade partners. Is there a point in Cyril wearing his kafia? And is there a point in him waving flags around and us using great, narrative around it? So that's a question, and if you look at why, because some of the people have been asking, why is it that we say all these wonderful things, but when it comes down to it, we don't actually do anything? And as I spoke to one of the people, Martin Janssen, who's one of the executive members of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, he pointed out how South Africa sees there are a few things which the Jerko has said as well, which is that we see ourselves as potential mediators in this. And let's be honest, Israel doesn't care about South Africa as a mediator. But because of our history of internal mediating after, leading up to the national elections and afterwards, we do have that history and we have been mediators in Africa previously. But does it actually matter in the big scheme of things, But this is one reason why South Africa is doing this. They've also told the PSC that in order for them to actually, for actually impose sanctions, they need a lot more civil society pressure than there actually is in order to show that it was because of civil society that they pulled out. So that's quite manipulative, the way that they've been the way that they've been dealing with this is very confusing. It's do they actually have the will at all to be pulling out? So that's the question that I was trying to answer in this, and it's a difficult one.
Well, thank you for trying to unpack that. I mean, it is a start, and this is a conversation I think many people need to be aware of, because on face value, when we look at it, as you have detailed, we do appear, or our government rather, does appear to be on the side of the Palestinians. But when we look at it, and even as you've noted in your article, a deeper look does show that South Africa also maintains strong relations in certain areas, especially in trade with Israel. So two things here stand out. So first of all, civil society and mediation. A lot of the justification for South Africa maintaining ties with Israel has been that at some point they would hope, at least, to be able to mediate between Palestine and apartheid Israel. The other one is civil society, which you say has not been applying enough pressure. So, does South Africa, first of all, have the standing to mediate? And then, secondly, what has gone wrong, or where does civil society in South Africa fall short in this regard?
Sure. I heard the second question about civil society, but can you repeat the first one about mediation?
Mediation. Does South Africa have the standing and the influence to be able to mediate in this issue?
Yeah, well, in terms of our technical experience, yes, I would say that we do. But when it actually comes down to it, is there open to any mediation? Is this the kind of approach that we've seen them actually having? I don't think so. I think that this is hopeful. The only thing that is really going to bring Israel down is resistance, and ultimately hitting them where it hurts, which is their pocket. And resistance, as we're seeing, is bringing around. Consumer boycotts are winning. Look at Starbucks. Look at Puma that just dropped Israel. The Israeli Football Association is one of its sponsors, and they're saying, it's for financial reasons. But we all know boycotts put massive pressure on them, and this is what resistance has led to. So mediation, it's all nice, but Israel doesn't want to have a chat. Sitting down and having a conversation with them is not going to work. So South Africa using itself as this, we want to stay involved because of mediation, I think is very hopeful, and we're not stupid. This is just an excuse. As far as I'm concerned, this is just an excuse to be able to maintain ties with them.
No, I think in order to understand why they would need an excuse to continue ties, if it really isn't about mediation and any attempts to mediate, and simply an excuse, as you put it, then that still leaves the question unanswered as to why would they continue keeping ties with Israel. And I think, as you've mentioned in the article, the history of this relationship needs to be assessed as well. Ilham, can I just ask you to stay with us for a moment while we take an ad break, and just consider that question while we take the break, and when we come back, we'll continue.
Sure.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Conveniently located along the banks of the Crocodile River bordering the Kruger National Park, as a guest at Buckler's Africa Lodge, one can enjoy an amazing sunrise or sunset on our spacious deck area while you catch a glimpse of some wildlife sightings along the Crocodile River. The sounds of the African savannah will greet you whilst you enjoy your morning coffee. Buckler's Africa Lodge by Tingana Collection. Buckler's Africa Lodge is ideally situated only 6 kilometers from the Crocodile Bridge Gate in the Kruger National Park. Catering for all travelers with variety, we have 4 types of the finest rooms: superior rooms, deluxe rooms, deluxe suites, and 2-bedroomed family units. Each room is equipped with the finest amenities to make your stay unforgettable. Guests can choose between the self-catering option or book their accommodation with breakfast and dinner included. Buckler's Africa Lodge is your ideal location for the ultimate Kruger getaway experience. We specialize in exhilarating and educational game drives in Kruger, tailor-made to suit your family. Inquire about our various accommodation offerings and other activities. Visit www.tingana.co.za for more information. Buckler's Africa Lodge by Tingana Collection. Experience the pulse of Africa with us.
There's no smell that takes me back to the comfort of my childhood than the smell of black seed oil being applied by my nanny. Now I'm using Tib black seed in my own home to soothe sniffles and coughs, to help with digestion and immunity, and of course, as part of my beauty routine. After all these years, I've come to appreciate the wisdom in finding comfort and shifa in trusted treatments like Tib black seed. You can find Tib black seed at all leading pharmacies or find out more at blackseed.co.za.
Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities, your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Ah, the kitchen, the heart of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. Our go-to place for those freshly stacked pancakes early in the morning or for that late-night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating, and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Sunfoil, Now We Cooking. Visit nowwecooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make.
The people of Palestine need your support now. Africa Muslims Agency is on the ground, already providing food, medication, and emergency supplies in Gaza. Donate any amount to Heal Palestine at africamuslimsagency.co.za. Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
(24 minutes past 8). Welcome back. We're unpacking the perplexing relationship between South Africa and the Zionist apartheid Israeli state. My guest this morning, Ilham Rawoot, activist and writer. Earlier on, we were speaking about the situation, the kind of ties that South Africa maintains with Israel, despite what its leaders say about Palestine and the stated support for the just cause of the Palestinians. Ilham, thank you so much for waiting. Continuing with the conversation, so just before the ad break, then I left you with the question of what is the history behind this relationship? I know we had the relationship between Pretoria and Tel Aviv under apartheid in South Africa. Now we have the relationship between Pretoria and Tel Aviv under democratic dispensation. Slightly different, but not all that different after all, is it?
Yeah, well, as I write about, the history is very interesting because it also goes to the question of, so we have a very strong Zionist lobby, and it goes to the question of why is the Zionist movement was so close to the apartheid movement? And you find that Jews at the time were coming from Eastern Europe, where they were persecuted, where they were, they weren't completely white. And then they got to South Africa, and the South African government gave them this whiteness, which also allowed them privileges, and it allowed them rights. And they would latched onto this. And what meant having this whiteness also meant being close to the apartheid government and taking on the apartheid government's line, which was at the time anti-black. And then they also did this thing where they tried to pretend to the world that they were anti-apartheid, and they put, they officially imposed sanctions on South Africa, but behind the scenes, and what they also spoke about was how we and the black people are so similar in that we're both indigenous, and they kind of try to use this indigeneity to also maintain a relationship with black South Africans, which of course was not going to work when you're, oppressing them. So it was quite tricky for them, but they also definitely took advantage of the situation that they were in and the rights that they were getting. And as the apartheid government was anti-Israel, so pro-Israel, so became the Jews in South Africa sort of automatically pro-Israel. So and I mean, it's really interesting because before, it just shows how easy they switched. Before apartheid, they were celebrating the Zionist, famous Zionist Jews. If you look at Mandela's legal team, almost everyone on both sides, the prosecution and the defense, were Jewish. There were a lot of good Jews that were fighting, for the anti-apartheid movement. And just before the end of apartheid, they were celebrating Percy Utah, which was the lawyer who prosecuted Mandela. And then as soon as apartheid ended, they were giving awards to Helen Suzman, saying that it was her, they say, something about her Jewishness, that her Jewish upbringing that had turned her into an anti-apartheid activist. And when she said, no, it's I went to a convent, I didn't have a Jewish upbringing, they said, well, it's instinctive, it's a Jewish instinct. And when Joe Slovo, they said that Joe Slovo had a warm Jewish heart. And these were people that they were out to get, for the whole time during apartheid. So they very quickly changed with the system. But then as soon as apartheid ended, they, like I mentioned, what they did with Helen Suzman, they very quickly had to change, also because of the way that the world viewed them. But now they'd already created these relationships with the apartheid government where they were selling nuclear arms. South Africa and Israel were assisting each other with nuclear sales. Israel was basically acting as a proxy. In turn, South Africa was acting as a proxy state for European governments to sell arms to South Africa when it was under sanctions. So basically, they were helping each other to get arms and money to each other when they both were not allowed to be under sanctions and the international legal system. So then, can I carry on?
Sure, go on.
So they were highly, highly complicit in maintaining the arms and financial upliftment of the apartheid system. Completely complicit in it. I mean, I also mentioned Hini van Veenen's book, Apartheid, Guns and Money, which is definitely worth a read, and because it details, it's got an entire chapter on Israel and South Africa. And you also look at how they were both, some of the other factors of why they were close was that they had these similarities in that they were both highly militarized states. They were both isolated from their neighbors, and they were all basing their existence and their system on biblical text, and actually the same biblical text. So that's also some of the factors that kept them together. Then it got to the end of apartheid, and here we are, Mandela, who acknowledged Israel as a state, but also said, our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians, which is a famous quote. But he made many quotes. If you Google Mandela quotes Palestine, you get pages and pages of Mandela's quotes. But it was, it was difficult because as he said, as the ANC had made concessions with the apartheid government, it also meant making concessions with the Israeli government. And this is where we maintain trade relations. So now we're at a point where we have to, just cutting those relationships, we're also trying to maintain the peace. I mean, we will lose them as a trade partner, which will be problematic for us. And also it goes to, if we cut diplomatic ties with, if we close we did close our embassy in Ramallah, and in Tel Aviv, and we downgraded it to a contemplation office, or something with a similar name. But if we expel our ambassador and we completely shut up shop in Tel Aviv, it also has repercussions for our embassy in Ramallah, considering that Israel has complete control over the West Bank. So these are difficult situations that we are in. So, I mean, in one way it's tricky for us, but in another way it's very simple.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to note that at a time when, at the moment now, I think there seems to be a growing awareness that Israel is an apartheid state. But there was also a time in 1961, I think, as you mentioned in the article, when apartheid South Africa's Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd accused Israel of being an apartheid state all the way back then. So I think that's something interesting to note. Also, just finally, and I think our next guest is waiting, so I will unfortunately have to let you go. But I just want to point out as well that when the African National Congress is confronted with this question about how the party is quite vocal about its support for Palestine, but the government seems to be doing things differently or taking different actions. Well, the party's defense then is that the state and the party are separate entities and they should not be confused. So, I would really have loved to engage with you further on that matter, but unfortunately our next guest is on hold. But thank you so much for your time this morning.
Shukran for having me. It's a complex question. It's something that we really need to talk about.
Yes, indeed. That was Ilham Rawoot, an activist and writer, speaking to us about the relationship between South Africa and Israel. Coming up next, we speak to Dr. Haider.